Welcome to the Improv Breakdown. My guest today is the founder and CEO of Play Polarities. He's the executive director of Comedy Sports Worldwide, the director of learning and development for On Cue. He's got he's a certified professional in learning and performance. He's got an MBTI certification, that's the Myers-Briggs type indicator, a coaching certificate with the Association for Talent Development. He's taught improv at Comedy Sports Chicago, the Second City. He's performed at Comedy Sports, Second City Theatricals, Gayco, WNEP Theater, and the IO Chicago, just to name a few. And he's one of only 4 people that I personally have ever called a mentor. Matt Elwell, thank you so much for being on The Breakdown.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. My LinkedIn sounds great.
I didn't just go to LinkedIn. I went.
You didn't?
There are so many places where your bio is on, and I pieced.
I appreciate it. It made me feel good.
Oh, great. So, Matt Elwell, at one point in your life, you were not an improviser, and you became one. Tell me how that happened.
Yes. So, I am going through several phases of being less of a jackass in my life. That's been my 47-year arc, is slowly unpacking and recovering myself. I have a great coach right now, great kind of helping me deal with my stuff. I highly recommend it. And so I offer that as the amuse before this arc of my story. Everyone is already bored. I was going to be a minister in like high school. Like I'm going to become a minister. And I realized I basically just tried to become whatever an authority figure was doing in my life that I liked, right? So when I was in school, I wanted to be a teacher. And then as I got, and then I did my first play and I wanted to be an actor director. And then I got really into my faith and I wanted to be a minister. And then I found another theater and wanted to become an artistic director. And then I moved to Chicago. And then not only did I want to be an improviser, but I wanted to be a improv director, teacher. And then eventually I wanted to run an improv theater. And I did all those things. And unfortunately, I was still me. So none of that worked very well.
Okay.
So I'm working on a lot during COVID. I have become the bread I bake. So I've been working on a lot of this, and that's pretty much that is pretty much my arc that I'm realizing is I see people in power in a field that I admire, and if they're nice to me, I want to become them. So yeah. Except for the last one in improv, where even if they're not nice to me, I still want to become them, I guess. So it's what it is. But bad breath is better than no breath at all. So let's just keep breathing, everybody. And we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out, Rich. We'll figure it out. You tell those 5 people listening to be cool, because we're going to figure this out now.
Oh, and with the drama we've had so far, we've got at least 10 people right home.
We're trending.
So you moved to Chicago for improv? Like you were pursuing
Yeah.
it?
So I was a very snooty Shakespearean actor at the Hedgerow Theater, right?
Okay.
I was doing Shakespeare and Pinter and all the white guys. I did all the white guys. We love all kinds of theater, Pinter and Mamet. So we're doing that, and I realized I'm not a great actor. It was very hard for me to focus on saying other people's lines. And so I did every professional actor, I did Christmas Carol. And Christmas Carol, I feel, you tell me, but I feel like Christmas Carol is the kind of litmus test of should you be a professional actor? Because it's always kind of a hodgepodge of talent, right? You're dealing with a lot of moving parts, whatever your role is. Over the 1 month of December, where there's already so much stress, there's already so much else going on in your personal life, professional, everything else is going on, you're going to say the same goofy lines 100 times. Christmas Carol is as long as there's a warm body in a 50-mile radius of the theater, they're doing one more performance of Christmas Carol, right?
Sure,
They've got
sure.
Thanksgiving to Christmas, and they're gonna bang them out, man. They're gonna do 2, 3, 4 matinees a day, right?
Sure, that's how they make their money for the year, right?
If you've got schools that will drive a yellow bus to you, then you will teach them the magic of this Christian holiday. God bless. And so that's what I did. And so by somewhere around the 50th performance of I'm all the fat guy parts, I'm Fezziwig and I'm Ghost of Christmas Present, and I'm looking over and you know, if these shadows remain unaltered, none of my brethren will find him here.
Ooh.
Right? It's about healthcare. But anyway, Tiny Tim is about healthcare. Why didn't Tiny Tim have Medicare? Come on. It's ridiculous.
I agree.
But anyway, you get to this. I think we're talking about me. We're getting so I do it 50 times. And I'm like, I hate this. I've said these lines so many damn times. I can't function in this space. I couldn't stay focused. Right. I did Pinter's The Homecoming, and I would just break because I would do so many bits during the pauses. Right. Like the other guy, you know, oh, my brother Lenny, you know, Lenny's doing all his Lenny serpentine, you know, oiling his way across the floor stuff. And I'm like, and not a raucous comedy, The Homecoming, like most of Pinter's work. So the universe was like, dude, like tapping on the shoulder, like find something adjacent to theater, but don't do this anymore. This is embarrassing. Right? And I had
a real honest shot, apparently, though. Like I
did, and the universe gave me real honest feedback. But I had tried improv in college, got really turned on to, you know, we had a copy of John Stone's Improv and a Dream, and so there we were in Newark, Delaware, hot spot for improvisation. You know, learning improv. So then I found out about the Chicago Improv Festival. And this was the second annual Chicago Improv Festival. And there was a workshop day where you would kind of meet all these kind of icons in improv. You'd go on a bus around to different theaters and they would teach you.
Wow.
This was the brainchild of Jonathan Pitts and I believe Frances Collier. Although I would only ever be in rooms with her, but like Jonathan, like I knew. But I went and I had that moment that so many people go is like, they're like, I'll dip my toe in this improv water. And they go, oh my God, this is my life. Like, this is my entire life now.
Yeah.
And so like, while I was out here, I scored a interview at Borders to transfer because I was working at Borders in Pennsylvania. And I was like, hey, I'll be your cafe lead or whatever. Turned out I got that job, and a month later I was here. I was just living in my manager's apartment, like they would ever do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but I was living in my manager's apartment, finally found a place, started taking classes at IO and Second City and Annoyance, just did the whole drink from the fire hose thing, at an improv theater every night, like just immersed myself in it, which I still recommend as like spend that 2 years living in France. Don't just go on Duolingo and try to understand France. Like you got to live in France, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And so that kind of set my trajectory. At that point, everything was either going to be direct improvisation or what I would later learn to be applied improvisation and what would become kind of my journey at this point.
It's interesting. So, you say like, oh, you know, I was at an improv theater every night, like you do, because like for me, like I get that that's normal because I live in Chicago, but I feel like there's not a lot of places where people go, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go do improv every night and I'm just gonna immerse myself in it. Like, I mean, it's kind of a unique experience, even still, I think, right?
I think it's unique to Chicago, LA, and New York. I think those are the three places. But I feel like even some of our smallest markets in comic sports, there's like 2 or 3 competitors. The problem is that most of them like roll up the sidewalk on the weekends. So now you get into space where you can't be at a theater every night.
Yeah.
And you have to choose.
Yeah.
And I think what was so great is like, you know, IO, you'd go in at like, you know, Tuesday at 11 o'clock at night and they'd be like, oh yeah, look who's up. You know, it's like there was always something, or like, speaking of IO, Sunday nights at 11:15, when as soon as the cast could get out of Second City main stage and get to IO, that's when Rich Tellerico and Bob Dassey and Stephanie Weir would do trio.
Oh,
And
wow.
like, so that's the, and same thing with, now I'm going back 20 years here, but same with Armando on Mondays. And I think that's what kids nowadays, but that's what I don't, now that all these places have closed during COVID, but that's, I don't think what people today may recognize is that there was this sense of worship about, so coming from, so what's been interesting to me on this kind of trajectory is like how much of theater is bound up in faith tradition, religion, spirituality, how much it all kind of gets into each other, right? But the idea of that there's reverence, that I'm in the presence of something greater than myself.
Yeah.
Like when you were at Armando and the room was full of adoring improvisers and we were all clapping to the ba-na-na-na-na-na, like in the dark, clapping to this music, right? Because of what was about to happen. And I was like, that's church. Like, that's it. You're in the presence of the divine. Not every show was divine, but you were in the narrator voice. It wasn't. But there was this feeling of like, this is the good stuff, right? And when you would see, I still remember Rich Tellerico pulling a trio to a close and just through description, pulling it right back to the hour ago initiation that all of us had forgotten, right? And I've seen Ross Bryant do that, with improvised Shakespeare. Like it happens still, but that kind of thing where you're like, yeah, the audience thinks it's like funny, right? Yeah. But like for us, it's transcendent. Like for us, it's work. Like we flip the scarf around our neck and go, amazing, right? Like that did it for me, and I was hooked. And I was like, I need to create moments like this, right? And or be a part. I just need to be in the room a lot. And so that's what I just started doing. What was the question?
Whatever it was, I feel great about your answer.
Okay, good, because I'm like, I don't even see the railroad trestles underneath I have no idea where we are.
No,
I'm
we're way
floating
through
this madness
at this point. No, I love it. So thinking back, and I mean, you've taught a lot of improv and whatnot, but like, is there like when you first kind of got into improv, do you remember like a lesson that you kind of took from either a teacher or from watching or from something that has just stuck with you, 20 plus years later?
I'll tell you the easy one that comes to mind. It's not about being an improviser so much as being a teacher.
Yeah.
And our mutual hero, Jimmy Carrain, told it to me. Name drop.
He's been on the show.
He's been on the show. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think he would remember me if you mentioned my name.
I think so.
He might be like, who? No, you know what he would do? The Jimmy reaction would be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I can do it better.
Take two.
Yeah. All right. Hi, Jimmy.
Oh man, if you know Jimmy Carrain, that was hilarious.
This is going to test so well in the focus groups. Oh, are you having a good time at the mall? Would you like to come and watch Rich Baker's podcast? Matt Elwell talks about stuff from 15 years ago.
So many things wrong with that statement.
It's a total, the solipsism hour with Rich Baker's friend. All right, so I was on a plane with Jimmy, and we were going to Orlando to teach a bunch of pharma reps communication skills, like one does. And we were talking about being a teacher, and I was a new teacher, and I was teaching at Comedy Sports, and I was very, as always, pretentious and overly passionate, and ignoring that people have real lives and families, and that this is part of a healthy life and not an entire life. And so I don't know how it got into. I might have just straight up asked him, like, "What's your nugget of advice?" I might have done that, but he said, "Don't let your fear get caught up in their fear." Ooh. Right? Same reaction. Mine. He didn't say that at himself. That would have been hilarious. How great would that have been? Don't let your fear get caught up in their fear. Wow.
I am so wise.
I'm gonna go tell Lizelle on that. We'll write another book. So stupid of me. Sorry. Here's what he meant. He said, when you're a new teacher, you take everything on your shoulders, all the weight on your shoulders.
Mm.
And you read into what other people are doing. But when you're a new student in improv, you're taking everything on your shoulders. So anything that goes wrong, you think it's because you suck, right? So you're a new teacher, and let's say just very simply, you ask for a series of scenes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're in your head going, is this the right thing to do? Would Michael Gelman do this? Like, you're right. You're doing all that stuff in your head. You're trying to be your heroes, right? You know, and your heroes don't want copies. They want descendants, but you know, you're still trying to be them. And then the person gets up to do their thing. And when they're doing it, they're in their head going, am I doing this right? Oh my God, this is how Tina Fey would do it. Like, they're trying to honor their gods, right? While you're trying to honor yours. And nobody's just being themselves in the space, right? No one's just letting this moment happen.
Yeah.
So you look at them failing and you go, they're failing. I am a terrible teacher, right? And they look at the look on, and so then you get a look on your face like, oh God, I'm screwing this up. But then they look at you with that look on your face and they go, oh God, I must really be tanking this, right? And then you see that look on their face and you go, yeah, I'm the worst teacher who's ever existed. And the two of you just doom spiral together, the teacher and the student, because you're both trying to prevent each other so hard from failing that you're sending the message that failing is happening, right? Like, you're so focused on failure instead of play, is my guess.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you know, and this is what made me, I think, a sucky teacher. Even, you know, I think some people got a lot out of my teaching, but whoa, was it luck? Because so much of my teaching was about me and dealing with my own trauma and my own shit in front of students, right? And so their behavior and their ability to perform became a function of my self-concept, right? And the worst position, worst head space for a teacher to come from.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I think about, like, should I go back to like just teaching an improv class? Like, I know that would be fun for me, right, to do. And I am thinking about it because I feel like I'm now at the point where I think I know what being regulated enough is. And I think I can recognize when I get dysregulated enough that I could effectively manage myself out of the moment and just let them have it, right? And then I could really be, you know, in learning and development, which is kind of like my stomping grounds now, is like, we talk about, you know, a sage on the stage versus a guide on the side, right?
Wow.
And I so often made myself the sage on the stage, right? And so now I think I really could be the guide on the side if I worked at it. Like, it would still be adaptive. I would still be having to focus on say less, like even right now, right? Like, I'm just babbling, right? And so I have to like really kind of listen to the moment and like hear a bunch of shit in my head and then just say one thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, you can't give a student, well, I certainly did, but I do not think it's a great idea to give a student 5 notes after a scene. Because what's the performance plan? Like, what's the improvement plan at that point?
Yeah.
Get better at 5 things, you know? I think
it can
you
become
give
about
one thing.
how many notes am I clever enough to give versus what actually will help them, kind of thing.
I think, you know, when I was in the Second City directing program with Ann Libra, another name drop, but I credit her with kind of helping me to stop talking so much and to listen, because she would just pose these questions. She used a very Socratic approach to teaching, which I would really love to take on.
Yeah.
You know, but she had Norm Holly there one time, and he actually gave a really, I thought, cogent defense of not giving personal notes. Like, you know, his point was students love them, but it's the focus is now on them and not the work, right? So it's permission for them to be neurotic and self-absorbed in a space we share with others, right? Because now it's about me and my process. And what do? I tend to do this in scenes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, what do the other 5 people who rely on you tend to do? Because it doesn't seem like you're paying attention to them, right?
Sure.
And so then, you know, I think there's a place for it. I know there's a place for it from traditional learning and development, is that it's a hallmark of growth, right? That we give individuals individual growth paths. But the focus needs to be on, is this an opportunity for this person to grow? Or, sorry to say this to most improv teachers, is this an opportunity for you to look insightful? Because I know so much of it was about my ego and my need to be respected and admired and liked, and to let go of all that and to still find your place in teaching. Like, that's a journey.
Yeah.
Like, that's a life journey. I think, man.
I love all this. I think it's really great that, because you know as well as, and every improv teacher knows this, is like, how many times has a student come up to you and said, "What do I need to do to get better?" And like they want that, and like as a teacher, we want to be the person to be like, "Here, let me give you some nuggets and let you go off and remember how great I was for giving you those nuggets and this, that, and the other."
Yeah.
But I mean, I started telling students years ago, it's like, I could give you those no's, but I don't know if they would actually help you. I would just be kind of trying to come up with things that sound clever. And it's like, what are you really asking right now? You're just looking for validation, right?
That resonates with me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think it's such a weird minefield, I feel like, of, you know, I mean, part of my job when I was running Comedy Sports in Chicago is I had to fire people, right?
Yeah.
And that was the worst part of it. I cleaned up vomit a couple times. That was a close second. But the firing was.
Is that what you
tough.
called firing people? Got to go clean up some vomit. Excuse me.
No, no, Rich. It was an improv theater. There was actual vomit. It's part of living that improv theater life, fam.
Living the dream.
But yeah, exactly. Your other podcast, as I remember, the last time someone asked me to be on a podcast.
My first podcast. Wow, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, see, I haven't worked a lot since. So, you're my Quentin Tarantino. You're dragging me out of the backfield, and I'm eventually going to be in the, I guess it's called the front field. I don't know sports, but I'm excited.
You're my Samuel L. Jackson. Yes, 100%.
Oh, fantastic. That's, if I could be any, I'm going to put that under special skills. So I'm sorry, none of this. So I was talking about firing people, and then I got really anxious about crying while I talk about this. So then I went to a bunch of comedy places. One of the things that was so difficult about it is that, like, if you're working, you know, like my other job was running a cafe, like a cafe downtown. And if I had to fire someone from the cafe, I was basically saying, hey, you're not working out at this place you don't care about, doing a job you don't care about, a job which you can probably get almost anywhere in the city, and you probably don't even have to say you ever worked here or give me as a reference, right? Like, there's probably, like, this is a bad day for you, but this isn't like earth shattering. Whereas when you're like running an improv theater and you are in charge of an improv ensemble, and it has come down to it's time for this person to go. And when I would fire people, it was way past time. Like, I was not good at being like, you know what, this is not going to get better. Because again, it was all about my ego. So I was like, I can fix them with just one more good rehearsal. And it's like, it's not about you. It's about them and their path. And their path is diverging from yours. So just let that happen. But what haunted me was that it's very hard to tell someone, hey, you're not a fit for this theater's show in this moment, this theater, this show, this moment, without them getting the message of, I don't think you're funny, right?
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to come to was this, our improv, especially when someone says I'm an improviser, and they make that jump from this is a hobby to this is an identity, right? That is huge, right? And I think that's why I see a lot of improv teachers, not this generation, but like the previous generation, like they ended with a great deal of bitterness, right? There's stories about, you know, everybody steals my work and everybody does this and everybody does that. And there's like this bitterness towards the end of an improv teacher's life because they identified as an improviser. Mm-hmm. And then other improvisers got famous and they became a respected teacher, right? Yeah. And as much as they told themselves like, no, but that's, you know, that's okay. like it's hard, right? It's hard to like to kind of anchor into being a best kept secret, right? That's a lot of work to tell yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and we both know people who won't say names, but like who were teaching prominently a lot of people and were bitter, or were obviously bitter, and
Hmm.
it affected everything. uh, yeah,
There's, I mean, there's there's such a weird, like I think of Julia Cameron's work on The Artist's Way and the idea, her position is, hey, you don't have to be this kind of, neurotic ball of chaos to be a good artist. Like you can have art as part of a healthy life,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like a lot of improv directors and teachers of a certain time period were like, well, screw this book. Like they were like, nope, no, extra toxicity, please. Could I have the mega toxicity slushy? Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like this is a really interesting journey. And you start to worry about it, and again I just keep going back to that. The more you're kind of thinking about yourself in this moment, you're adding stuff instead of taking away stuff. And probably the goal is to take away stuff. Because if you take enough away of your stuff, you might finally see your student,
Yeah. Ooh,
you know?
yeah. I've had so many, I'm sure you have too, had so many students over the years be like, I want to get into improv teaching. And I'm like, that's cool. Just know that it is a largely thankless job. Like, in many
Mm.
ways, like your students might thank you or they might not, but you don't do it for that, right? Don't do, I was like, please don't do it just for the money, because it's one, there's not a lot. And two, there's plenty of ways to make money out there, but this isn't for that. It's like improv teaching has to be this like selfless thing where you just get joy from being the conduit for other people's success. And most improvisers, and me included, are on improv stages because we want you to look at me, right? And whereas improv
Mm-hmm.
teachers, like I want you to look at, go that way, kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I've talked a lot of people out of being improv teachers, and I hope at least in the best way, because people just think, oh, this is the next thing in my journey, and it's like
Well,
maybe not.
I would say that's improv's fault, because I
Oh,
certainly know, I feel like coaches and teachers at certain theaters, um, like they were good on stage and someone noticed them and was like, oh, you're really great up there. You should teach,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is like, imagine opening your mouth and someone being like, oh, that is an amazing set of teeth you have. Have you thought about becoming a dentist?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because these teeth are so good. It makes perfect sense. Let me go. Where's the gas? Let me go anesthetize some people and rip their faces off. Like, yeah, it's like, ooh.
I'm sure I know what I'm doing. I won't mess up anyone's mouth here.
No, 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 because mine is perfect, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I gotta say, I think some of the best improv teachers were ones who were kind of B plus players, because they understood how just soul crushing it can be
Yeah.
to kind of have that moment of like, I'm just not as fast as the other kids. Like I'm just
Yeah.
not. And so then to find grace for yourself that you can then transfer to your students, right? I don't know. I for some reason in this conversation, I keep going back to Viola Spolin and her things. And I feel like one of the things, and it's, I never met her. It's apocryphal.
Yeah.
Um, Amelia Sills may be like, that's all wrong. But like, I feel like her debriefs, from what I read and kind of what I heard Delman say, like her debriefs are like very much like, what was the objective of the game? Oh, to touch three objects. Did they touch three objects? Right. And then the moment a student would be like, I thought it was a pretty good scene, like, did they touch three objects? That's the feedback we're giving right now. Did you touch three objects? Because, her whole thing was about purging approval, disapproval,
Whoa.
right? So we just create all of this. Can I create more shadows of my face? Which is, can I create this community, right? When we purge approval, disapproval, we create community, right? So now I'm no longer performing because of what you think and what notes you might give me at the end because I'm so special, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just here exploring the space with not so much a swimming teacher as a lifeguard, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Glad you're recording this. It's all going in the book I might one day write. Um, but like I think that's the point of of teaching. And I think when someone says I want to be a teacher, that in a weird way might be the first warning sign, right?
Yeah.
I want to be a teacher. I want my identity to be this thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, because I was a Christian, I mean, I am a Christian, but I used to be real good at it. I got all the awards.
Oh, great. Well, that's what Jesus wants.
That is. There's an all-Christian version of the Oscars. Except what you get is heaven. This is all terrible.
Is it
but
called the
I'll
Thorny
tell you,
Awards? Okay.
like, what's that?
Is it called the Thorny Awards?
Girl. All right. That's not Hollywood. But but growing up in the church and growing up in small town, religion and bouncing around other churches, and I have family and faith and stuff. So I hear the tea on a lot of pastors, right? And talking about improv teachers, like the same rot is in both trees. And that rot is, I have come to serve, by which I mean I have come to identify as someone who serves. Right? Yeah. And so it's still about me, right? And I see this in clergy as well, as there's a desire to be right and to share truth, and they have a master's degree in divinity, so they're going to answer you in terms of Greek, Hebrew, and theology, which will kind of instantly create a caste system of understanding, right? And it's the same as when I if someone met Viola Spolin or Keith Johnstone or somebody in class, right?
Yeah.
Like there's an instant hierarchy that Spolin would have hated, right?
Yeah.
Because it's that thing of like, oh, I should listen to them. I shall now crave their approval. Instead of play the game. Play the game and stay conscious.
It's almost like you're saying that the word facilitator really more can aptly apply to this style of it's because teaching is about I've got information I want to teach you, whereas facilitator is here's the exercise, here's the objectives, go.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think I will also say from my short, very embarrassing career in Aikido with Greg Ginda, there was that improv, the improv theater. I was in an improv theater, Greg and I, and there was that Japanese Cultural Center on Belmont, and so we would go over there and do Aikido.
Oh. Poorly.
Which was one of the reasons I wanted to go, because I had lost my fear of failure of being on stage, and I was teaching students, and I was like, I need to get back to that feeling of what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So I went into a different place where I, as a very uncoordinated, unsportsy fat guy, have never felt comfortable, right? Never felt comfortable in my body, never felt comfortable in any kind of physical pursuit. Trivial pursuit, great. Physical pursuit, not so much. You're such an easy laugher, which I love. But so I did that, right? And it was the same thing. Like they would teach you the pose, and then they would help you fix the pose, but then they were out of the picture, right? Yeah. Like they weren't in fact, so this is something I talk about sometimes when I talk about these things. My improv teacher, so my improv teachers all teach me how to do improv, right? And, it's no secret that IO had a style of improv. Second City, had a style of improv. Annoyance clearly has a style of improv.
Sure.
And you learn that, right? You learn improv.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is a very Platonic model. Improv is this thing. It is perfect in every way. You will never achieve it, but you will slowly kind of work towards it, right? Yeah. And you will slowly kind of go on a journey towards this thing outside of you. I feel like that's the unspoken, unconscious paradigm in a lot of improv training. You're heading to something, and I'm watching your progress.
Yeah.
And so then I was a freaking terrible martial artist in, with senseis all trying very hard to be like, oh, all right. We can't put you in the group for 5-year-olds because you would squash them.
Sure.
But that's where you should be. So just stay over here where you won't hurt anyone. Don't knock over the trophies of other kids who know how to do this. But so we're sitting there one time, and it was one of the times at the end of class where Sensei actually said something. And so Sensei was talking about her Sensei, the guy who started the dojo. And she said, I'm trying to not to get emotional here, but she said, oh, he was built low to the ground. He was a grappler and a wrestler. So his Aikido was a lot about tumbling and grappling. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment, and it was an epiphany, right? It was like one of those Eckhart Tolle kind of like, it's all changed. So here's this person I adore, another authority figure. So of course I want to be a sensei kind of,
sure.
Right? And she said this and I went, his Aikido. Right? It wasn't, you work really hard, you'll get to do Aikido one day. We're all heading towards Aikido, this thing outside of you. It was, this is inside of you, right? Ooh. Right? What did the great pastors say? The kingdom of heaven is within you.
Yeah.
It is within you, right?
Oh, I love this.
Right? And then what do improv teachers say? Well, let me give you some notes on how you can get better at improv.
At this overhanging, arching thing
right.
That, if you're lucky, you can grab onto, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of saying, what's your improv? Maybe this is your improv, right?
Yeah.
Or say instead of we saying, don't ask questions. Granted, I don't think anyone is still in the don't ask questions camp, but let's say they are. Instead of saying, tell me about your improv. Why, what are the questions doing for you right now? Mm-hmm. Why do you think your improv it likes questions so much? Do you like that? Does it work for you? What happens in the scene? What would you like to be different?
Wow.
As you develop your improv, where do you think you want to take it? And so now we switch from the teaching model to the coaching model, right? And not the coaching like we did, which was basically kind of a glorified director teacher who you paid, but a true like an executive personal coach who's like, where's this coming from? Where do you want it to go?
Yeah.
Right. So that for me, I think when you really look at what all these different spaces are doing when they're doing it right, what Spolin wrote, Aikido, a great pastor, which I'm very sad that not more people got to meet one. And improv is like, it's revealing. It's not instilling, right? Spolin has this great quote. I think her son actually was like, my mom used to say this, so he put it in the 3rd edition. She said, the purpose of improv is not to teach good behavior. The purpose of improv is it was something about like reveal, it was to reveal a felt love of neighbor. It was the idea that, a lot of bad Christianity is you're inherently bad, so you better ask this guy Jesus for help because you're screwed otherwise, right?
Yeah.
You're hopelessly lost. If you don't ask Jesus for directions, you're never going to get there, right? Whereas Spolin was like, that's in you. But the world has piled so much shit on you that you might need help digging out. But the improv, the salvation, you're bringing with you.
Woo. I love it.
I haven't gotten to talk about this shit in a while. I'm usually like, so let's talk about tone of voice and gestures.
Yeah.
And how they can help you as the communicator. Mr. VP of thing I don't understand.
Well, and I this has been so golden, but let's just talk about improv, applied improv for a second, because like I knew a little bit about it before you, but I mean, you were truly my mentor as far as like you took me under your wing, you took me on so many gigs and really helped me to understand a lot about improv facilitation. And I know that you've just learned tons and tons more since. If someone is wanting to get into being an improv, applied improv facilitator, working for companies or schools or whatever, something like that, like what's your Jimmy Carrey nugget that you would be like, here's something for
you? What's my Jimmy Carrey nugget? Make it easy for me. Okay.
Let me just tee up this. Just say a great quote right now.
Yeah. Ooh.
Call back.
Oh my God. I will say this. So there's a big world of applied improvisation, right? And, therapists use it, coaches, as I said, use it, trainers use it, facilitators use it. I will say the hardest thing to both remember and to practice is to walk fully in both worlds. And I think this is where, if I had a, I have carved something close to a living for myself out of this work for about 17 years in one form or another.
Yeah.
And for the last 5 years, it's about all I've done is using improvisation in some context.
Yeah.
Where I was able to compete, I think, is that my industry was improvisers who went, I could make more money if I called myself an applied improv trainer.
Yeah.
And so they went to business as a improviser who does training.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and I've heard several people make hilarious fun of these people, they were a business person or a trainer who took one class at Second City.
Yeah.
And now they're like, oh, I can use this in my work.
Sure.
Right. And so now they're a one-person shop selling applied improvisation. And both groups failed to yes and, right? They both just kind of grabbed it and went on their way, but they didn't yes and. So when I realized I really wanted to do this, I immersed myself in the Association for Talent Development, as it's now called, has a Chicagoland chapter. And that's straight up talent developer, instructional designer, spend most of their day grinding out articulate decks, like really kind of, blocking and tackling training people. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was a space in which I was the funny guy with the funny job, which is always kind of enjoyable. But I came in so low on the learning curve that it felt like a foreign language.
Oh, wow.
And right. It just felt like a foreign language. Like, are you using ABCD learning objectives? And are you, have you done your front end analysis first? Are you really sure this is the training that they need? So that, there's a lot of professionalizing of yourself that's needed. And so I got this, it's now called a CPTD, but I got a certification. I was in a study group with a bunch of people who had never done improv in their lives. They were just trainers. We were all trying to pass this test together. Wow. And eventually I became the president of that chapter, right? And so as a chapter of 400 to 500 learning and development people.
Wow.
And I'm running it. So I tried to do the same thing I did with improv years before, is go to France, right? I wanted to spend years immersing in it. Yeah. So I immersed in it. I learned the language. It changed how I thought about it, right? It also helped me with some of the, the stuff that I'm talking about of having to get out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So often, and so here's why I'm saying this, is so often someone will come to you and be like, we really like to improve as a team, and we just thought a fun improv day would come, right?
Yeah.
And most people will be like, oh yeah, great, we do team building. We'd love to be your team building vendor. Tell us about your group. How many people are there? When are you free? We'll, and you can basically see them spinning into delivery, right? You, Mr. Customer, have said you have this need. I will now take your money and I will perform this thing for you. Yeah. The problem is the client probably is using that to deflect from what's really going on, right? If I go, yeah, we just want to do a fun team building, right? Maybe that is every year we do something and this is no different.
Yeah, checking off a box kind of thing.
It is checking off a box, right? First, if you're in that bucket, if you're in the, I will do your building and let us check off your box bucket, right? If you're in that bucket, they're not coming back to you next year.
Right.
They're going to go build a bear next year. And then the year after that, they're going to climb a tree and they're going to plant a tree, and then they'll plant a tree. Lots of arboreal things will happen, right? But it's like you didn't, because you were fungible, right? You were one thing in a series of things.
Yeah.
But if you can actually ask some really smart questions of that person and say something like, how would you like your team to communicate differently to each other? Yeah. When are there disagreements on your team? Do people tend to talk about their issues on your team, or do they tend to harbor stuff?
Yeah.
If imagine a perfect team in your mind. You want to have a team building happen. What would be different if after our team building, they became a perfect team?
Wow.
Right? Or, my favorite is say, what do you want to be different on Monday?
Oh, love that.
Right? Now, sometimes, they literally will be like, dude, my boss told me to look at an improv today. Like, I'm going to play Zip Zap Zop with you, or I'm going to play Zip Zap Zop with this other guy. So what do you got?
Yeah.
Right? In which case, I've got some pretty nice Zip Zap Zop.
Well, here's a Red Bull.
Oh, thank you, Red Bull. Oh, God. Oh, I think you should sell t-shirts that say, I died inside at the Rich Baker show.
I can't wait for that reputation.
Come for the improv breakdown. Stay for the real breakdown. But like that's I think if you're gonna say I'm an applied improv blank, get better at the blank, right? Yeah. If you come from one of the major houses, right? If you come from one of the big theaters where you actually went to France and you became a really good improviser, then work on the blank. But I will say the converse is also true, that if you're like, I'm a facilitator, now I'm going to learn this improv shtick, embrace it. Don't teach it until you get it, right? Yeah. I say that as someone who taught it, didn't get it, right? I ate, slept, and drank it, but I had too much trauma in the way that wasn't being addressed, right? Wow. So like I needed therapy and some life experiences to kind of dig out the stuff that was between me and getting it, right? Wow. Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm getting it now, but I'm saying I'm better, right? I can kind of notice when I'm making it about me and not about what this scene needs or what this student needs. Doesn't mean I can always answer that need, but I can recognize it, right? Yeah. So if you're from a market where doing improv meant you got to do one show a week and take one class a week, you probably like that neuroplasticity may have not kicked in for you. Yeah. So this is not part of you yet. This is something that you adapt into on stage, right? So that's I'd say that was one of these other, I don't know why my thesis today has been how much improv is like church, but like when I thought I'd be a pastor, one of the things pastors used to say is that church is not your one day a week to be with, to worship God. Church is a celebration of spending a week in worship of God, right? Yeah. And so when you look at a week, if that one improv show is your chance to do improv, and not your one chance to celebrate with an audience the improv you've made your life about that whole week, you're not firing on all cylinders. You're not having the same thing that I think you would see in, the great improv teams in Chicago when, they were playing and you were there and you were kind of celebrating a week of their play, right? Yeah. I don't know.
Woo! Oh man, I could have another podcast of just trying to break down unpack all this. Like that's dense and wonderful. That's great.
Dense and wonderful is the Matt Elwell story. Thank you very much.
Very nice. All right.
You're winding up. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's end on a silly note. What is a character voice or character that you have played on an improv stage that still makes you laugh when you do the voice?
Oh God. See, I get into them and then I can't get out of them, and then my wife yells at me.
Oh no.
She's like, stop. You have to stop. I'll try that. If it's really good, she'll come from another room and tell me to stop. But I always like, there's one, there's the, like Chris is it Pratt who does it on Parks and Rec when he does the old man. It was like, I hang down to the toilet water. Like I do that, like, hey, let's get everything together into the bar and then we'll all have a shindig. And then but it's when you heighten it, then it gets so great when you're like digging shins for days. Like, just don't let go of it. Just drive it and drive it and drive it until someone comes in from another room and actively tells you to stop. Then you know. Then you know you've begun.
God, man, I could talk to you all day, but I mean, dude, I'm sure that no one would listen if
The two of us have had such a great time here, and we're
like,
the only ones who know about it.
Is that podcast 8 hours? I'm not listening. I'm not listening to 8 hours. I won't do it. Where would you like to send people who want more Matt Elwell in their life? What's
well, I mean, if they want to at this point. So like I certainly still work for CSE Worldwide, which provides comedy sports around the country. And if you're like in a market that doesn't have comedy sports and you're like, you know what, we could use a little joy and sunlight in this corner of improvisation, you can certainly reach out to cseworldwide.com. But like in terms of what I do, none of those relationships are employee relationships. Like they're kind of like my largest partners. And I would say that what I'm doing a lot of right now is when COVID hit, I tried to figure out like, what does all this have to do? Like I've talked about so many different things, right? Like Aikido and improv and faith and training and coaching. And like, it all comes down to how do we get better at getting better? Like all of these are strategies for creating some kind of holistic, organized approach to improving ourselves.
Yeah. And
not just ourselves, but to do that in a way that creates space for other people to improve themselves. So then it becomes about improving ourselves. I say, one of the things you'll see is improve self, team, and world, right? And so for some of that, you have to get out of the way. So if people are interested in that and they'd like help with that, I would direct them to playpolarities.com, which is kind of where you'll find my model. Everybody has a model, that's mine. And I have like a networking group on there where we meet every 2 weeks and hear a speaker. That's called a play date, and you'll see it on there. But I'm also available for, individual coaching. If you're like, I want to use this, I want to apply my improvisation more holistically to my life, and I want to get better at things. That's certainly possible. I would say this, and you can use the contact us at Play Polarities to do this. If you're like, hey, I'm one of the 5 people who heard that podcast, and I would just like to find out more about you, like you can sign up at my Calendly just to, have a call, and we'll figure out if there's some way to either work together, or you refer me to your company, or, somehow we can be benefited by being in each other's lives. And I'm happy to talk, more about what I do there. So playpolarities.com. And, as the world opens up again, I certainly will be, interested in doing some live improv coaching and teaching, and even some virtual still, because I kind of love that all I had to do to be on this podcast with you was stay seated in the same place I already was.
It's real nice.
I'm not against Zoom. I'm not against it.
No. It's the parking and the traffic is wonderful.
Yep, I agree.
Matt Elwell, thank you so much. It's just great talking to you as always, and just thanks for being on my show.
Rich Baker, in 10 years when you have your next podcast, I am coming right back.
Get ready.
I've lived the dream. I had my improv breakdown, and in 10 years...
You'll be on the What the Hell Am I Doing With My Life podcast.
This week, we help Rich Baker reassess this particular life choice. Every week, a different life choice that we help Rich Baker fix. He's finally honest about it, folks. He's finally honest about it.
Thank God.